Question remains to be, what was AIDS? Most obviously, it remains to be a detrimental disease that evolves from HIV, but it was also what characterized the 1980s as a constant crisis. AIDS affected every demographic, yet was mostly publicized among homosexuals. AIDS, an acronym for Acquired Immunodeficiency Syndrome, is nearly always fatal. HIV, the beginning of AIDS, destroys the body's CD4 lymphocytes, otherwise known as the T4 helper cells, that dictate immune response to disease. When the immune system is effectively compromised, opportunistic infections that would otherwise be fully recoverable usually end up deadly. To be diagnosed with AIDS in the 1980s, one simply had to just have HIV so extreme that the immune system fell to opportunistic infection. The CDC later, in 1993, revised these guidelines to include that the CD4 count of the immune system also has to be below 200 per microliter of blood. AIDS was not always AIDS, however. Following its official discovery in 1981, it was often referred to as opportunistic infections that took advantage of the severely impaired immune system, such as Kaposi sarcoma, PCP, lymphadenopathy, or different types of pneumonia. Other names like the 4-H disease for heroin users, homosexuals, hemophiliacs, and Haitians, or GRID for gay-related immune deficiency, were also used before AIDS was officially coined in mid-1982, following the protests of gay activists who stated that the usage of GRID and gay plague connotation leaves the gay community exceptionally vulnerable and disregarded from stigma. There was an astonishing lack of response to the rise of the epidemic by the Reagan administration. President Reagan did not acknowledge AIDS to the public until 1985, 4 years after its official onset, despite the prominent media coverage within the first 2 years. To add to his inaction, an address on AIDS formally was not provided until 1987. His address was advocating for the protection of AIDS-infected individuals from stigma, comprehensive value-based education, and continuation of AIDS research funded by the federal government, which he ordered to be started that same year, 1987. Contradictory to his alleged advocacy, however, he did a relatively poor job reducing the stigma around AIDS as he connected it to moral deviance.
If children are taught their own worth, we can expect them to treat themselves and others with greater respect. And wherever you have self-respect and mutual respect, you don't have drug abuse and sexual promiscuity, which of course are the two major causes of AIDS. Nancy, too, has found from her work that self-esteem is the best defense against drug abuse.
Reagan's usage of the term sexual promiscuity only served to further demonize gay communities under evangelical government. Reagan's Surgeon General, Dr. C. Everett Koop, noted that officials of the administration thought that this epidemic was simply retribution for the vices of homosexuals and drug abuse. Negligence to AIDS has certainly not ended socially and federally. Shortly after President Trump's inauguration in 2017, he dissolved the Office of National AIDS Policy, ONAP, which was put in place in 1993. In Donald Trump's first and second presidency, he placed excessive attention on LGBTQ+ rights and their erasure, specifically the erasure of transgender individuals from law and medicine. To mention briefly the similarities between Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, both President Reagan and President Trump have been known as aggressive capitalists. Seen in Reagan's famous Reaganomics, or Trump's new tax policy, significantly reducing taxes on the wealthy in similar fashion to Reagan's plan. Similar they were also in handling national epidemics. The Reagan administration took 4 years of extended pressure from the public to address the ever-growing hysteria around AIDS, while the Trump administration significantly downplayed the severity of COVID-19 despite its immediate address.
Do you turn on the news? COVID, 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 COVID. Would like to talk about COVID, and then next Here's what happens November 4th. You won't hear too much about it.
A few days before the 2020 election, on November 2nd, Trump responded to his rally crowd chanting "Fire Fauci," the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases since 1984, that he will think about it after the election.
Don't tell anybody, but let me wait till a little bit after the election. I appreciate the advice. I appreciate it. No, he's been wrong on a lot. He's a nice man, though. He's been wrong on a lot.
This can be taken as an example of the Trump administration's constant attempt to downplay COVID-19 as a national issue. The rate at which cases were rising in November was not far down from the rates they were rising in May, and the death toll was reaching new heights. When we refer back to AIDS, we can see much of the pain inflicted upon the gay community at the time was due to extensive stigma. Former president at the time, Trump, took to Twitter in May 2021, describing COVID-19 as Chinese virus, which only served to stigmatize America's large Asian population, not simply the Chinese Americans, but all Asian Americans. It was the same way in the 1980s with the entire queer community because of the scapegoating of the homosexuals. From these examples, it can be inferred that stigma is one of the most detrimental aspects of AIDS and the COVID-19 epidemic. The gay community continues to suffer from fear and stigma that was perpetrated by their scapegoating in the 1980s, whereas Asian Americans continue to experience inflated rates of hate crimes due to their scapegoating in the 2020s.